in this session, I will be taking you through how to get started on your Pressbooks project. And so covering everything from creating a book to exporting your book, showing you, the directory and how you can find resources, et cetera, et cetera. But before we get started, I thought this would be a really great place to start because like I had just mentioned, we don't provide support to end users, and oftentimes answers can be found very quickly from our documentation, which was made for users. So here I am on our Pressbooks guide. This guide contains sort of everything that you need to know, and especially if you're getting started out with Pressbooks, a lot of your answers can be found in this guide. The most effective way to use the guide, other than to obviously read it in full, which no one has time for, is to use the search bar up here, or to use Control F to find sort of keywords. So if you're looking for, glossary, how to create glossary terms, then you might want to search glossary. So this is our guide. I will leave the link to this in the chat, and everything that we cover here today will be in the guide. And the guide will probably cover it in even greater detail because this guide has existed long before even my time at Pressbooks. So I just wanted to let you know of that. Second thing is our YouTube channel. So this is where we post product updates as well as different tutorials. So this series here, the Introduction to Pressbooks series with these beautiful illustrations, they are very short snippets that will show you how to navigate your way around Pressbooks. And the concepts that we cover today will be especially in Introduction to Pressbooks, Pressbooks authoring and editing platform, as well as cloning and adapting OER with Pressbooks EDU. There's also other videos on here that you might find useful. So, and if this is your preferred method of learning, then this might be helpful to you. And then the last thing I wanted to say is our webinars. Like I just said, if you have any questions that you'd like to ask me directly, this is the best place to ask them. At the end, I field all of your questions and answer them. And this session itself won't be an hour and a half, so there's always time at the end. There is another session in 2 weeks, and it's a continuation of this one. So if after today you want to get started with interactive features, et cetera, that session will cover that. So I just wanted to let you know. Awesome. So I wanted to now navigate to your sort of institution. From here, you just have to navigate to your institution's Pressbooks site, and you will land on your homepage. It will look something like this. This is the Aldine theme, and all networks sort of take this shape where there's a network title and then the boxes that tell you about the network. And heading into the admin panel, this is the panel that you will see. This is where you can get started with your book, and it says create a book or clone a book. I will cover what it means to clone a book later on, but intuitively, the easiest place to start is creating a book. So I'm going to click on this, and once you begin to create many more books, you will see all the books that you are already a part of. But moving down, you will see that you can create your book here. So from here, let me call this November Demo 2021, and I will call it something like that as well. And down here, it'll say privacy. Would you like your book to be visible to the public? I will show you what this setting actually looks like in a little bit, but it doesn't really matter for the purposes of now, and you will create a book. So at this point, you might be wondering, I don't know the familiarity level of what everyone, or rather, I'm not too sure how familiar everyone is with Pressbooks. I'm assuming that you have seen Pressbooks books before, but if you go to, I do not want to delete my book, I want to go to visit my book, and you'll see that all books sort of take this form. You'll see here that there's the title and the author and the license, the book cover, as well as the table of contents, the book information, and the metadata at the bottom. So to show you an example of what it looks like to have a fully populated book, here I am on the Pressbooks directory. This is a referatory or an index of sorts, or simply a directory that contains all of the public books across the Pressbooks networks. So your institution, if you've already started publishing books, might be a part of this. If you're a completely new network, then you can be the 110th or the 111th Pressbooks network to be incorporated in here. And all of these books on here are free and accessible for you to read. And you don't even have to be part of Pressbooks to be able to read these books and share them with others. So if you have, you know, friends or colleagues who are not whose institutions do not have a Pressbooks license, it doesn't matter. You can still read these books. So let me actually just go on to, this looks like a great book. So it says designing and developing high quality student centered online hybrid learning experiences. That's a mouthful. You can see here, this is what a fully populated book looks like. And all books sort of take this form, but the difference being that all books, you know, have different subjects and categories and different sorts of elements within them. Hopping into a chapter just to show you what an example of a chapter looks like, you can see that there's the title and all the text underneath it. You can include H5P activities, which are interactive activities. I go in the advanced session, I show you what it's like to create and include them. There's also, you can include images, you can include text boxes, you can include YouTube videos. There's ways that you can really make your chapter as sort of dynamic and interactive as you'd like. There's footnotes and glossary terms like traditional textbooks as well. So it doesn't really, it really doesn't fall short to a traditional textbook in any way. It just really adds to it. We also offer 21 different kinds of themes. So this typeface and colors are one set of themes. There's 21 other kinds, and I'll show you what they look like later on. But I just wanted to take the time to step into a chapter to show you what this looks like. And with the sort of the range of activities that are offered with H5P and the kind of images and YouTube videos you can incorporate, we have everyone use Pressbooks, regardless of whether you want it as a faculty handbook or a language learning book or a STEM textbook or a purely an interactive textbook as well. So there's a lot of different opportunities that you have, and hopefully as I go through my demo today and the one in a couple of weeks, you'll have a more holistic view of how that is possible. Because right now I can, if you've never used Pressbooks, I can understand how it may seem a little bit daunting. So my goal for today is to lower that barrier so that you can see how exactly these pieces, these bits and pieces come together. So going back to my sample book, like I said, you should go to your institution's Pressbooks network and sign in and create a book, and this is where you will land. On Pressbooks, the flexible part is I frequently get the question, how do I publish on Pressbooks? There's really no such thing as publishing. It's just whether or not your book is public or private. And when I created the book, I think I said at the bottom said, privacy, do you want this book to be visible to the public? The reason I said it doesn't matter is because you can always come and change the global privacy setting of the book. Public means that the book is available for everybody. So if all of you went to university.pressbooks.pub/November demo 2021, you would see that this book, you can see this book in this little, empty husk. Whereas if I were to set it to private now, if you were to refresh this page, you would get access denied. This book has been made private and you are not allowed access into it. So that's how easy it is to quote unquote publish. So you don't really have very stringent parameters like regular publishing processes. It's up to you to decide if your book is private or public. If you're an instructor and you've written a whole book, but for the summer you want to do a major overhaul of this book and you don't want it to be public, while you are editing the book, then you can set it to private, and then when it's ready, you can just as easily set it to public. So that is the difference in the privacy settings, and it's just as simple as that to make it accessible. Does anyone have any questions so far? Great. So before we get started with the book, there's a couple of things that I wanted to show you. Going down into users, you might want to work on this book with someone else while you are writing this book, because writing a whole textbook might be a lonely process. Here is where you'd be able to add the people who you want to have work on your book with you. So going into users on the left-hand side, you can either find add new up here or add new down here. They'll take you to the same place. And you can either add a new user as an existing user or as a new user or as an existing user. All it means is add an existing user means adding someone who is already on the network. So for example, if you're working on your book with your network manager, that means they're definitely an existing user because they already have logged into the network before. Whereas adding A new user would mean that they've never logged into this network before, which is why you need to give them a username and need to give them an email. What the role means is the privilege they have associated with the book. So admin has the most amount of privileges, whereas subscriber has the least amount of privileges. Subscribers can only read private content, whereas admins have administrative control of the book. If you'd like to know what each of these administrative roles, what each of these roles mean, you can find a chapter in our user guide about user roles and what it means to be what it means to have each of these positions. So as an example, I will add Thomas, seeing as he's in this session right now, and Thomas is already a user on this network, so I'll add him as an existing user, and he will now be added to this book, and that means that he can start to work on this book with me. Let's say that you are an instructor and you want to write this book with many of your students, which is something that we see more and more frequently, which we love at Pressbooks. And you might not want to add each of the 4 users one by one. What you can just as easily do is to add their emails, 1 entry per line, and give them a role. So let's say that you're adding 40 of your students plus 2 of your TAs, then you can add all of them and give all of them author roles. And then what you can do is go back to the users and go into the and go to edit them, and you can edit two of the TAs roles into, say, administrator instead of the author roles that you initially prescribed them. So it's just as easy to move things around, make things really flexible. And what's really nice is that, even if the TA decides to leave the school and their email gets deleted, none of their content will be deleted. Only their usership will be removed, but all of the content that they wrote will still remain. So it's a really convenient way to work on projects with no risk of, your content getting deleted. The second thing that I wanted to cover before getting started with the actual writing portion, which is in the organize module, is all of the book information. So this is all of the information, obviously, surrounding your book. Something that I did want to point out is that on Pressbooks, everything is always changeable. I think I mentioned this about 5 minutes ago, which means that you can change your book title, you can swap out the authors, you can always change the license. Something that you cannot change, however, is your book's URL. The only person who can change that are the network managers. They have special privileges to be able to change the network URL. So keep that in mind when you're creating your book. If you do want to change your book's URL, you will have to reach out to your network manager. So I wanted to tell you that just so that you have an idea of what's possible and what isn't while you are getting started on your project. So starting at the top, you can, like I said, you can change your book title. You can set a short title, a subtitle. There's also a contributor module here. So there are all of these contributor roles ranging from author all the way down to contributor. All of these get pulled from one module, which is the contributor module here. We've recently revamped our contributor module, which means that you can include far more information than what we had before. We used to only have name and first name and last name. Now you can add as much information that you'd like, including a profile picture, biographical information, suffix, prefix, and a URL-friendly version of the name. And you can really play around in here to see exactly what you'd like to add. Something that's also really convenient is that if someone's already been added as a user, what will happen is they will automatically be added as a contributor. So there's no need to add them twice. So if Thomas were to go and accept his invitation for this book, then Thomas would automatically show up here, and I wouldn't have to add Thomas and give a profile picture and a biographical info. It's all associated with their account on Pressbooks. So it really streamlines the process so that you're not entering twice. What's also really convenient about this is that you can choose to add other contributors. So for example, if I'm working on this book with the 40 students that I was talking about for my sample class, let's say that I'm an English instructor and I want to, it's a class collaborative project. I can say, I can always give a name for my class, and let's say I upload a picture of the class, then I can add this new contributor, and instead of having a real person, I can attribute this class. So there's a range of different ways that you can credit and attribute your work to one person, a group of people, or a large group of people. It gives you a lot of flexibility here. And then upon adding them to the contributor module, you can pull them into each role. So that is how you can sort of manipulate who's contributed to your work. Moving further down, there are a couple of publication information fields for publication information. So there's publisher, publisher city, publication date, and then all of this printing information and cataloging information. What we do recommend is to include a publication date at the least, because this goes into the metadata of your book, and places like the directory and other repositories will pull from them. But it's up to you to decide whether or not you want to include all of this other publication information. There's also the language portion down here. This determines the language of your book. So for example, I believe this book is a Spanish book. I don't know if they decided to keep the language of this book in, I guess they decided to keep it in English, but basically what the language of the book means is it will change all of these headings associated with the book into that language. So it doesn't, there's 3 different language options for Pressbooks. First is to change the language for your settings on Pressbooks. That you can do by editing profile. The second thing is to change the language of the book. So like I said, what surrounds the book. The third thing is language and script support for languages that don't use the Latin alphabet. That is on a separate module. So you can see here, this is the description. It says this particular settings, that's the metadata in your book, making it easier to find. It also changes some system generated content. So if you're also interested in languages or writing in a different language, that is also comprehensively written in the user guide as well. Moving further down, there's the cover image. This is obviously the image that you have for your book. Next is subjects. We use a thema subject categories. There are about 1 million different, figuratively speaking, there are about 1 million different, but there are actually probably hundreds of subjects that you can set for your book. And this is obviously very important for cataloging purposes. So it's important to research into what kind of subjects you are using. There's also copyrights down here. We offer all different kinds of copyright licenses, ranging from all of the Creative Commons licenses to public domain and all rights reserved. When your book is created initially, it will be given an all rights reserved license, but you are welcome to go in and change this. If you're interested in what each of the Creative Commons licenses are, or you're concerned that, if you're concerned that your reader might not know what each of the licenses mean, then in each of the books, I'll go back to my example book here, at the bottom of the book where the licenses are contained, whatever license you've set will always contain a hyperlink to the Creative Commons website. So that is super handy. Lastly is the fun stuff. It's about the book, the tagline for the book, the short description, which lives at the top of your book, and then the long description, if you decide to set one, will live in the book information section at the bottom of your book. This is the short description. So that sort of rounds out the all of the book information and all of the stuff that I wanted to talk about before getting started with the content. Does anyone have any questions about anything I've covered so far? Excellent. So from here, I wanted to head into the organize module. This is sort of what you've been waiting for. This is where all of the magic happens in terms of writing your book. And this is sort of where we'll spend the majority of our time looking through the visual editor and what the book looks like. So a book is divided into 3 different parts. There is the front matter, the body section, and the back matter. And if I just hop into show add front matter, you can see that there are a variety of different front matter types that you can include, and the back matter type is the same. So if I go into back matter, you'll see that there are the very typical classic, all of the terms down, all of the back matter types down here. These all probably look very familiar to you, and you can include content here. The body section is the middle section. You can create many different parts and you can create many different chapters within them. So going back to my example to show you an example of a populated book, this up top here is the front matter. All of the parts in the dark and the bold here are the parts, and all of these are the chapters within those parts. And then at the back, you can see they don't have a back matter section. This is the last part with a chapter. So that is how a book is broken down. To show you a little bit about the features on them, you can add, you can either choose to add these parts up here, choose to add certain parts up here, or on the left-hand side, whatever's up here is also on the left-hand side. If you want to throw away a chapter, you just have to click trash. If you want to edit a chapter, you just have to click edit, and view will take you into what the book looks like in the webbook form. I know that the edit button is very close to trash, but if you ever trash something and you're concerned, it will be in the trash, and it won't, it asks you for many confirmation messages before you actually delete it forever. So don't worry too much if it ends up in trash, just have to recover it here. So let me just create another part to show you what it looks like. So I'll call this part 2. And going back to organize, I will also add a chapter over here, and I'll call this chapter 2. You will find here that from this module, you can move chapters around just by dragging and dropping. However, something that you cannot do is move between each of the 3 components. They are where they are, so keep that in mind. However, it's not the end of the world. You can just as easily always, copy and paste the content and just copy it into a new chapter that you create in another section. So it shouldn't be that big of a deal. And before I get started in showing you what it looks like within a chapter, here are some of the privacy settings for the chapters themselves. Show in web and show in exports. Show title is pretty self-explanatory, but all show in web and show in exports mean is whether or not you want it to be shown in the web book. So if I were to not show in web, this book is set to public right now. So if I go into the home page, you'll see that now it has a lock button, which means that it's not visible to the public. Because this entire book is public, however, if any of you were to go to this site right now, because you are not a user on this book, you will only see chapter 2. Chapter 1 is only in my view because I've hidden it from the web. There's also the show and exports button. This is whether or not this chapter will be included in your exports. So when you go to export your book into a PDF or an EPUB, this button will determine whether or not this chapter is included or not in those exports. So let's say that you're that same instructor and you are editing your book for the summer, but you're not editing the whole book, you're just adding a chapter, and this is the chapter that's work in progress. You can still choose to keep the rest of the book public and keep everything in the web and show in exports, but you might just want to hide the chapter that's that is work in progress from web and exports simply just by checking it off. So that is what that looks like, and these are all of the visibility settings that you have the flexibility of adjusting for your book. So from here, I'm going to step into a chapter to show you what the editor looks like. So there's the visual editor and there's the text editor. The text editor accepts HTML, and if you're not familiar with Pressbooks, you might not know, and some of you might have picked it up already, but Pressbooks is built on top of WordPress, which is why things might look very familiar to you. So in that same vein, we offer a visual and a text editor, and it accepts HTML. By and large, most people will opt to use a visual editor because it looks very similar to other very common software platforms such as Microsoft Word and Google Docs. However, if you are familiar with editing through the text editor, then it might be worth, if this is something that you're comfortable with, by all means, go to town. But like I said, the visual editor is here and it tells you what each of the buttons are when you hover over them. And we also have a guide chapter that tells you what each of these buttons mean if you're interested. So I just wanted to spend some time going through each of these sort of the most important headers and not headers, sorry, most important buttons, starting with headers. So I will start with heading 1 and I'll say, this is the main header. And I will point out that for accessibility purposes, I would recommend that you use headings sequentially so that regardless of what modality people are accessing your book from, whether it be from an EPUB or a PDF or even from a screen reader, that you use them sequentially so that it reads the same. So that is what the heading looks like, and you can try out the rest to see how they differ. Moving down, you can see that this comes with a sample text. So this is just what the paragraph text looks like. There's a couple of other things like table. So moving into table here, you can see that it has the same sort of drag and drop that the other softwares that I mentioned have. You can see all the cells within them. And if you want to create lines, all you have to do is click full grid and it shows you all the lines. So you can play around with those settings as well. There's also text boxes, which I know are very commonly used. There's many different kinds of text boxes. Standard is just a standard box, whereas and shaded is a standard text box with shading inside of it. But there's also text box with header text boxes and colors. So here is an example of that. And within it, there's key takeaways and learning objectives. They're all the same. They just have different colors, and you can replace the text. What's really convenient about the text boxes and the tables is that it doesn't just accept text, it can also accept images and videos, so you're not limited to what kind of content you choose to include in there. There are also a couple of other things that might be worth of note to you. So let's say that I decide to include a line that says, in most parts of Canada in November, it's so I might say a very simple sentence like that. And if I wanted to add a footnote, all I would have to do is drop my cursor so you can see where I'd want to include my footnote, and I'll click on footnote. You can't see this right now because there is a browser pop-up that gets, and it says at the top, enter your footnote content into here. And all I'm going to do is type in my content, and I'll say, based on personal experience. And you can see that once I click OK, this footnote will get inserted between two pieces of shortcode. And that button sort of streamlines the process for me and eliminates me having to write each of these tags on either side. So that is super convenient. And I might say, and if I want to include a glossary term, I might say, I can highlight this word, Canada, and I'll insert a glossary term. And this is a Pressbooks pop-up, so you will be able to see this in my screen share. I can say, and I can click insert, and you can see that it created a term for me. What's really convenient about this is that if you're creating a glossary heavy book, if you go to choose existing term, if I want to add and if I want to include the same glossary term for the term Canada, all I have to do is click Canada and click insert, and it will auto-populate with the same content that I had inserted previously. So that is how you create glossary and footnote terms. And if you wanted to include math, then what you'd have to do is just click insert LaTeX. This is also another browser pop-up, just like the footnote. You won't be able to see it on my screen share. And I'm just going to type in the math that I want. So I'm simply going to type in the Pythagorean theorem. Just a squared plus b squared equals c squared. And you can see here that the Pressbooks has automatically included the shortcode on either side to indicate that this is math. So from here, this may look quite unassuming, but when I go to preview, you will see here that all of the things that I had wanted to format are formatted beautifully. So clicking on this term, it'll say it will give me my glossary term. My footnote is hyperlinked and it will take me to the bottom, and upon clicking on the enter button next to the footnote, it will take me back up to where I was reading so that you don't lose your train of thought when you're, or rather your place in your book as you're reading through your book. And lastly is my math term, which is now beautifully rendered into an image. Pressbooks uses a plugin called MathJax, which is a very accessible math tool that we use. Upon clicking on this, you'll see that there's a zoom factor that has zoomed the picture in for me. And if you want to right-hand click, you can see many different settings. It even has sort of highlighted or light boxed the right-hand click box to show me all the different settings that are available. You can have different zoom factors, zoom triggers. So in this case, I set this to 400%, which is massive, but I can always set it to something smaller, as well as a variety of different settings. So I'd recommend that you check this out if you're interested or are planning on incorporating STEM or math statements into your book. All of the concepts that I just covered here are also in the guide. I believe each of them definitely each of them have their own sections, and some of them even have their own chapters about them. So I would recommend that if these are features that interest you, then I would recommend that you go and have a look. So there you go. Those are some of the features that I wanted to show you. If some of these other features interest you, then I'd recommend that you have a play around in your book and see what you can come up with to fit your needs. So those are some of the visual editor elements that I wanted to show you. There are some other things that I wanted to show you here, including images. So up top, you might see a button that says Add Media. Upon clicking on this, this will take you to a place called the Media Library. So you can either choose to include your images as you go along by uploading images here. So let me take an image that I have let me take this picture that I took last winter, and it will upload my image for me. I just dragged it on there. You can include information about the image. So some important things, very important parts about the media are on the right-hand side that you should include, including alt text. This is super important for accessibility purposes. The text will show up in place of the image if the image, for whatever reason, fails to render. It's also really important to include alt text for screen readers because screen readers will pick up on them. So make sure to include this if accessibility is important to you. Moving further down, we have the title of the image. So I will say and you can also include a caption and a description for the image as well. Also, if you did not create the image, it will be important for you to attribute who the image came from for copyright purposes. This is obviously very important. If you're wondering where you include them, they are here. So include information. So in this case, I took this image, so I will give it my name. And let's say that I give this a CC BY license. I don't care if people reuse this image. And you can also set the image size for it. So I will give this a large size so people can see my image in great detail, and I'll insert this into my chapter, and you will see that my image has been brought in beautifully. And from here, I can choose to make the image smaller if I want. So that is how easy it is to upload an image. If you're interested in uploading a video, you can just as easily do so, or uploading an MP4 file, you can just as easily do so on here. If you want to see what kinds of files Pressbooks accepts, there's also a guide chapter in our guide about exactly what files are acceptable. However, if you're considering uploading a very large image, I would recommend that you upload the video onto YouTube. Pressbooks has a limit on the media library the media library upload capacity is 25 megabytes. The reason for that is for security purposes, and also because Pressbooks is not intended to be a sort of a media library hub. It's meant for content. So you shouldn't hypothetically have to upload not that images ever really exceed 25 megabytes, but we ask that if you are using something bigger, a more efficient way would be to upload your book onto YouTube and pull it directly from there. I get this question often where instructors say, I'm creating a textbook, but it's on a week by week basis. So my goal is to have, this module for this week, the next module for next week. What you could easily do is take your recorded lecture, upload it onto YouTube, and then paste the link directly into your book. So here I'm going to take the link of the book, I'm going to copy, and I'm going to come to my book, and all I'm going to do is paste the link, and it will simply render, and it will start to play in the browser. So it won't take the student elsewhere or whoever the viewer is. This makes things really convenient so that you can just as easily copy and paste the link. And from here, I will preview again, and you will see that my image is has been beautifully brought in, as well as the YouTube video as well. So this is what I wanted to show you. If you're curious about why that YouTube video can just very easily copy and be pasted into the link, it's because we inherited this from WordPress. Like I said, Pressbooks is built on top of WordPress. And from here, it says, okay, so what sites can I embed from? From all of these sites, you should be able to copy and paste the link of the URL and paste it directly into your browser. And you can see YouTube here is at the bottom. I know some other very common sites are Vimeo, as well as Dailymotion, which I believe are 3 of the biggest sort of video sites that people commonly use. So I wanted to let you know of this, that these are the embeds that we support. If you're curious about how to embed complex content, I know lots of different institutions decide to host their media on different sites. I cover that next in the next session, in the advanced session. I believe it's on the 17th. So if you're interested in that, you can come to that session to find out more about how you can embed more complex content. But by and large, just to show you how you can embed images and YouTube videos, it's just as simple to add media or to just copy and paste the link of the YouTube video. So that is what I wanted to show you. Associated with this, on the left-hand side, you'll find media, and this is where your media library is. So when I click on the add media button on top of my chapter, this is where all the content is being pulled from. So when I go to add new, you can either choose to upload images directly onto here, or you can choose to upload directly from the chapter itself. It all pulls from the same place. So you can upload here and upload and pull from your chapter, or if you were to upload directly from your chapter, it would automatically populate the media library. So it goes both ways. So that is a little bit about how to include text and other content. Some of the other things that I wanted to cover down here is the chapter level metadata. You can set a copyright license for the chapter. So many authors will choose to keep the book licensed CC BY, but different chapters may have different licenses stated. And when you go to the metadata of the book, it says this book is licensed license X, except where otherwise noted. So except where otherwise noted is indicating to the fact that different media elements and different chapters may hold different licenses. So this is this is a really great part of OER, right? There's different ways that you can license a book and make it as accessible or as inaccessible as you'd like. You can also add chapter level authors. If you have 40 authors for your book, this is the perfect place where you can attribute each individual student or groups of student by individually listing out their names. So this is the chapter level metadata, and so this is like the smaller sort of chapter level chapter info as opposed to the book info, which is for the entire book. And then the last thing that I wanted to show you, where is the chapter that I've been working on? There we go, is the revisions tool on the right-hand side. If you go to browse, you will see every iteration of book you have saved. And sometimes the book will autosave. However, I wouldn't really rely on that. I know it's not like Google Docs where it will auto save for you. There are auto saves, but you have to, I would recommend that you actually do click save if you want something to be saved. You can see everything that you've included and have removed, which is super convenient, so that, if this is a long project, you might decide, hey, I had this thing from 6 months ago that I would like to have in my book again. You can always scroll back to the iteration from 6 months ago, copy the thing that you had removed and re-include it in your book. Or if you'd like, you can restore that autosave and it will automatically revert the book back to where it was before, and it will still keep all of the iterations of the book. So it is super convenient if you want to make changes as you go along. I know I've been talking for a while now, so I wanted to pause and see if anyone had any questions.
I have a question.
Mm-hmm.
Does the user guide give guidance on writing alt text? And if not, do you have any recommended sources for that?
Oh, that's a great question. We do have a chapter about accessibility, but it doesn't necessarily contain it. It contains sort of the accessible measures that you should take, but not necessarily how to do them. What I would recommend is the accessibility toolkit from BC Campus. And they have all of the different, I believe there's multimedia best practices for all of these. And I believe that this should contain how best to include alt text. And this book was created on Pressbooks, which is, and it's sort of a Bible in the Pressbooks community. However, the content on there is valid and it's wonderful, and the team there are incredible, and hopefully you will have information about how to write alt text and beyond for other best practices. So I'd recommend that you have a look there.
Excellent, thank you.
No problem. I've just included the link to that book in the chat. Does anyone have any other questions before I proceed? Awesome. So at this point, you might be wondering, okay, I know how to write content in Pressbooks now. I know where to go to create a chapter and to move things around and to sort of have the shell of a book. However, I know that many of you are writing content outside of Pressbooks, and you might be wondering how to get content inside of Pressbooks. Well, you can do so by using our import tool. On the left-hand side, you can go to Tools underneath Users and go to Import. And you can choose your import type. Here are all of the import types that we accept. And if all of these fail and you don't see the content type that you are looking for, you can just as easily just copy and paste the content into your chapter. That also works. However, our importer will accept the following types. Keep in mind that when you are creating books like this, keep in mind that when you are importing content, not all platforms share the same method of formatting, especially with Microsoft Word. They have lots of different tags and embellishments that will require for you to format more when you come on Pressbooks. So if you were to import a Microsoft Word document, there might be additional formatting that you have to do to clean it up. That's really what I wanted to say. So if you do decide to do this and things don't look as exactly how it did on your original document, just keep that in mind. To show you what it looks like, I will show you an example of how to import. So here I'll go back to this accessibility toolkit. This is a CC BY license. So from here, I'm going to click webbook or Pressbooks XML, and I will copy the link of this here. And I will click begin import. And it will pull up all of the chapters for me from that book. Obviously, this is most easily done with a Pressbooks book, because if it's a Pressbooks book that you're trying to import, then obviously your Pressbooks book will understand that content very well and will know exactly how to read that content. So from here, let's say that I click on organizing content, and I will say that I want to share this imported content in web. It will just take a moment to bring everything in. But this is really great because if this book had glossary terms, it would show me all of the glossary terms as well. And you can choose where the book goes. In the import module, you saw that there's all of those sort of bullet points that say, do you want to bring this chapter as a part or as a back matter? You can decide that. In this case, I kept the chapter as is, as a chapter. So here it is, and you can see that all of the content has been brought in. And I'll go to view so that I can show you what this looks like. This looks just like this chapter. It's just that they're using different themes. This is the McLuhan theme. This is another theme for which I'm not remembering the name of. It might be Clark. And I'll show you all the themes in a little bit. But you can see here that all of the images and the hyperlinks have been brought in, as well as all of the other parts of the books. So this is a really great way to bring in content that exists elsewhere, and is a great way to sort of remix your book. What's really convenient about this, this tool is that so long as the content that you're trying to bring from the license of that original content allows you to do so, you can remix content from many different places. If I want to, take this direction in the book of an accessibility handbook, I can, bring in a chapter from here, and then I can go back to the Pressbooks directory and look for another book related to accessibility by looking for other accessibility books on here. I see that this has an CC BY share alike license. If I want to bring a chapter or two from there, I can really remix and take the book to the next level, so to speak. And if the license permits you to do so, you can also edit these chapters, right? In this book, I see that this chapter that I had taken from, at the bottom, this chapter has a CC BY license, which means that if I want to go in and add a paragraph or remove a paragraph, I am able to do so in my book, and I can just add my name onto the list of authors. So there are so many different ways that you can remix your book to fit your needs. So that is something that I wanted to point out. If you're also looking to remix from a variety of different Pressbooks resources, you will also find that sometimes on Pressbooks books, they will often have a download this book button available on the bottom. I'll also show you what that looks like in the settings after I've shown you this. You can see that from here, I can download the Pressbooks XML file and go back into tools, and you can upload the XML file by selecting that and choose it and importing my file from there. So there are a variety of different ways that you can bring in content. And like I said, copy and paste always works. So you can, that's sort of a fail safe method to bring in content as well. Okay. So the last thing that I wanted to show you before I show you sort of the fun stuff like themes and appearance, all the stuff that I've been saying until now that I'll show you later on. The last thing that I wanted to show you is cloning. So I believe when I had gone into, at the very beginning of the session, when I had gone into the admin panel, there was a button that says clone a book. Cloning is a process in which you effectively create a clone of that book. And you might wonder, how is this different from importing content? It's different because importing is done to an existing book. Because if you remember, to import a book, you need to go onto the tools bar of that book and click import. So importing is done into a book, whereas cloning is creating a brand new version of that book. So on the directory, let's say that I really like this book. Oh, I have that keyword in there, that's why. You can see that our Pressbooks librarian Travis curated this collection called Healthcare, and in here there are a variety of really wonderful books. And let's say that I want this book about Northern and Indigenous health and healthcare on my network. To do so, all I have to do is check the license. So in this case, it's not an all rights reserved license, which means I can clone this book so long as I, after I've cloned it, I follow all of the stipulations of the original textbook. So if I don't sell it, I can attribute the original authors, I can make my modifications. I'm going to copy and paste this book, copy and paste the link of the book, sorry, as a source book URL. I'm going to give it a target book URL, so I can give it whatever name I want, and I'm going to give it a target book URL. This you can leave optional if you wanted to take on the form of the original book. And once I click clone this book, it will create a brand new copy of this book for me on my network. And you can see at the top, we wrote a message that says this tool allows you to clone openly licensed books. So this will take you to the guide chapter that shows you exactly what cloning a book means. And it also takes you to the Pressbooks directory so that you can look for which books you might want to clone from. And for the sake of the session today, I've actually already cloned this book. The reason I've done this is because cloning is a process in which, like I said, everything is cloned over. So that includes the text, the hyperlinks, the glossary terms, the H5P activities, all of the media, all of the metadata is being brought over. So it can take anywhere from 60 seconds to a couple of multiple minutes, depending on how large the book is. So that being said, I took the time to, you can see here that I've taken the time, I've called this INDG Healthcare. So that's what I would have done at the time. And I cloned this book. And now this book lives on my network, because it says university.pressbooks.pub/Indigenous Healthcare. And it's an exact clone of the book that existed in the original book. So it's a great way to bring things in. The only difference is that it won't bring any of the appearance related things in. So you can see in the original book, they chose to include a download this book button, which is a separate setting, and the themes might be different because that's also an appearance setting. So below, you will always know if a book is cloned because it says it will automatically create a book source for you, so that it automatically creates a book source for you so that you are inherently crediting the author, because obviously that is a large criteria when you're remixing or reusing someone's content to credit them properly. So we create this statement for you and you cannot delete this statement. It says that this book is a clone version. So there you go. If you click on this will take you back to the original. And like I said, if you click on the original license, it will take you to the Creative Commons site that shows you exactly what the license means. So from here, if anyone decides to clone my book, they can. And that link at the bottom will still take them back to the original so that it properly attributes the right author. So this is really great because from this book, if you'd like, what you can do is go into the admin module. And in this case, this book does allow me to include more content. What this means is that if I want to add more chapters, so in a previous demo, it looks like I added a irrelevant chapter called Hidden Money Scholarships, as well as added a chapter called Test Chapter. Hopefully when you're remixing your book, you add more relevant chapters than the ones that I chose to include for the purposes of the demo. But so long as you're allowed to do so, you'll be able to add chapters, remove chapters, move them around, include more content onto any given chapter. And you can also still import into a cloned book because the license permits you to do so. So I hope that sort of helps differentiate cloning and importing. They do similar things, but they are different. Cloning will create a brand new book, whereas importing you can do onto an existing book, whether it be an original book or a cloned book. So they go hand in hand. They're not mutually exclusive, so to speak. They can go together. The other really common question I get about cloning is, what's the point of cloning a book that's identical onto your network? Well, the point is that firstly, if you have that existing book, even if it hasn't been remixed at all, is that it lives on your network now. It might feel a little bit foreign to send your students to another institution's site to read the book, when you can just as easily have that book and have that come out of your Pressbooks network. So that is the first reason. The second reason is something that I've already stated, which is that you can remix the book so long as the license allows you to do so. So you can really cater the book and make the book your own and to fit your course or your institutional needs. And that's a great way to sort of make the book fit your purposes, really. I see that I have a question in the chat about cloning. It says, when you add things to a cloned book, will that content be marked as in any way different so that people can see the differences? So, or does the bottom statement just take care of it? That is a fantastic question. Really a great question. And both of those are great questions, actually. The bottom statement does just take care of it, because if someone chooses to license their book as CC BY, that is allowing for the opportunity to be remixed in whatever direction possible. Obviously, licensing comes with a level of trust. Hopefully someone doesn't take your content and make it extremely inappropriate that strays from the purposes of the original book. However, those are the stipulations of the license, and we expect people to be sort of good community members. So to answer that last question, the bottom statement does take care of it. However, you can allow, we have a button that says show source comparison, and that will show you the difference between the current state of the original book versus the current state of the book that you've cloned. I'll show you that in a moment because I will show you what all of the appearance modules look like, but this is a great segue. I just wanted to show you what the cloning tool looks like and how you can really employ cloning to have that book onto your network and remix it and revise it to fit your needs. So we're sort of heading into the last part of the session here. The two things that I wanted to cover at the end is appearance and exports. Firstly, I'll show you appearance. This is sort of the very fun part of the book. Like I said, there are 21 different themes available on all networks. So you can set what all books can have different themes. It will by default most of the time be given a McLuhan theme because the McLuhan theme is the parent theme when our developers created Pressbooks. This is the first theme they ever built. And all other themes are child themes, which means that they built this one first and then they built all the other ones based on McLuhan. It has, to that note, there's nothing significant about that. All I mean to say is that most books will be created with McLuhan. You can change the theme at any given time. It won't change any of the content of your book. It will just change the sort of the appearance coding, or rather the custom styles on top of it. So none of your content will be impacted. So if that's a concern that you have, don't worry. You can shop around, you can activate different themes without affecting your content, and just to have a look at which theme best fits your needs. The themes that I use the most, and I think I get questions about this sometimes, so I wanted to point that out, is Malala, Graham, Jacobs, Clark, Bradbury, and Andreasen, and McLuhan. So hopefully as you're watching the recording, you can write all of them down, but you can sort of have an idea of which are meant for monographs versus which are meant for textbooks. For example, you probably don't want a Bukowski themed textbook, but maybe you do. So it's up to you to go and look through and decide what you're looking for. And I wanted to let you know that that is here, and you can change the theme at any point. We have theme options. So theme options will change depending on what theme you're using. A lot of the settings will stay the same. So for example, this setting will always be here, but some parts that may differ depending on the theme is the default text box color might change. So if you're using the Andreasen theme, the example text box might not be purple. It might be by default be green for whatever reason. So those are here. You can change the colors of these text boxes if you would like. There's also a media attributions. I want to point out some of the most important ones. All of the other ones, you can have a look, you can sort of play around with them, or you can look at our guide to see which ones may be best suited for you. Media attributions is great to have if you've spent the time on that media library module. When you upload a picture, you know how I showed you the source attribution side where you should credit the author and you can provide the link and you can provide the license for that image. When you insert that content, all you have to do is go to click media attributions and it will auto-populate at the bottom. A really great example of that was the OpenText Accessibility Toolkit. You see that at the bottom, they had an example of this. So they created, when they uploaded these images, they included the attributions and then enabled media attributions, which is why they show up on the bottom. A couple of other things that I want to mention is language and script support. So this is where if you're using a non-Latin based alphabet language, these are where you can declare script support for them. Otherwise, they will show up in little tiny blocks. So you will want to declare them. And if you're writing in many different languages, you can declare as many as you'd like. All of the ones that use the Latin alphabet should render fine. So I know most commonly, especially in North America, Spanish and French are used. You don't have to declare language and script support for those. And in the web options is where enable source comparison is. So I've already enabled it here, but by default it comes unenabled. So what this will do, I will show you an example. So when I save changes, I guess it was already done, but when I go to here, if I were to click on a chapter, going down to the bottom, now you'll see that there's this button. And when I click on this, if you add or delete, it will show you the comparison between this text and the current version of the text from which it was adapted. So this is a really great way to show and make transparent exactly what has changed. And this ties into your question because the bottom statement does just take care of it, which is why this is not mandatory. However, we did build this for educational purposes. So if you would like to enable it, you definitely can. And yeah, but it's not a requirement, and it obviously has to be done from the perspective of someone who has cloned the book. So you can't force someone, you know, who cloned your CCBY book to have this is what I want to say. But I hope this sort of answers your question in full. And it also includes the hyperlink to the original chapter as well as the original book, which is super convenient. And then from here, you can choose a bunch of other web-related options. PDF and ebook options are also there. Obviously, they are all separate because you won't need to determine margin sizes for an ebook or web options, but you will for PDF, which is why they're all separate. However, the global options will affect everything. So for example, if you change the colors of the example text box to be pink, then it will change across all of the different formats. So that is the difference between global options and the web, PDF, and ebook options. The last thing that I want to show you in the appearance module is custom styles. This is where you can add your CSS. Something that I want to mention now is that we do not offer assistance to your network managers about CSS. This is done completely at your own discretion. So if you would like to include CSS, then by all means, go to town. There's different, because all of the different formats have different code and different class names, etc. You have to set them separately for each different format. And if you'd like to set them, all you have to do is write before what we had was the style sheet, and you could edit it directly, but we realized that that was playing a very dangerous game however many years ago, 4 or 5 years ago. So we changed to this method, which is great. So if you want to write your styles, you can write them down here and it will override the settings that exist that are defaulted, which is what's up here. You'll see that you can't edit this at all. So you're just overriding whatever already exists by default. And for whatever reason, if you've written CSS and you've broken the page, all you have to do is go and delete your CSS and it will default back to the original, which is not broken. So I hope that answers your question. Do this at your own discretion. And if you don't know what CSS is, you can just, or rather, if you're not interested in using this, you can just ignore this part of the demo. The last thing that I wanted to go into is exports. So here are all of the exports. You can choose to export, you can select as many or as few as you'd like to export your content. And when you export your book, this might take a moment because this is a large cloned book. Obviously, the more exports you choose or the bigger your book is, the longer it will take to export. But they will create beautiful exports that you'll be able to see down here. And just as an example, I'll download this and I'll upload this onto here. And you can see that all of the content of my book has been brought in. I think I chose print PDF, so there are no hyperlinks, but all of my images are here as well as the tables that were in the book. There's also some other formats that are available to you that you can download as well. If you would like, these can be made available on the homepage. So all of the exports that live down here can be made available on the homepage, like I've shown you here. This is the part where I show you how you can enable this download button, is by going into settings and going into sharing and privacy. It says share latest export files. So this is where you can determine whether or not I'd like the latest export files to be available to the homepage for free to everyone, or you can set it to no, which means that that button won't be there. So if I click yes and click save changes, the only export that I had made available about a second ago was the PDF. So the only one that I will see is the PDF. However, if I want more to be available, I can always export different kinds, different formats, and they should be available for people to read and download. And obviously, this is a great thing to have so that your students can, or whoever is reading your book can choose to read it either by printing it at the university's printing center or the institution's printing center, or also read it on their ebook if they don't have Wi-Fi. So there's a variety of different ways that you can do to make this book as accessible as possible. So that wraps up the session, and I'll stop the recording here.